take a stack of comprehensive research, analyze the frameworks, and really extract the clear, actionable path forward just for you. Today's is dedicated to tackling one of the most frustrating and universal experiences in modern life, that feeling of being completely and utterly stuck. You know the feeling, right? Whether you're hitting a prolonged wall in your career, maybe watching a long-term personal goal just gather dust, or simply finding that the sheer weight of your to-do list makes doing anything seem, well, impossible. It's that mental and emotional rut where inertia wins every single time. We are here not just to talk about it, but to really break down the exact mechanism of this paralysis. Our mission today is clear. The sources we've compiled argue pretty strongly that motivation isn't some scarce resource you either have or don't have. It is, in fact, a thoroughly cultivable skill, something built on structure and system. We are going to reveal a precise 10-step framework that, according to this research, moves you from paralysis to purposeful action. The core insight we have to grasp first is this. Understanding why you feel immobilized is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite to reigniting your drive.
And that's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? The aggregated research really suggests that feeling stuck is rarely a moral failing or, a sign of simple laziness. It's almost always a confluence of specific psychological barriers, maybe entrenched habits and environmental friction points all working together. We're dealing with more of a system breakdown, not really a character flaw. So we'll start by unpacking these primary psychological barriers, the main motivation killers, so you can maybe correctly diagnose your own freeze point. Only then will we systematically move through the 10-step roadmap provided in the sources, charting the course from stagnation to conscious, purposeful action. We are moving past abstract theories and really getting into the tactical mechanics.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we even get to the solutions, we absolutely have to talk about the psychological root causes of being stuck. Why does the brain hesitate and freeze up even when we consciously know we need to move forward? The sources name 5 major motivation killers that act like cement, locking us into that cycle of inaction. The first one they identify is overwhelm. And the sources explain this isn't just having a lot to do. It's more the feeling that the goal, or maybe the stack of responsibilities, it feels disproportionately large compared to your current energy level.
Exactly. And the research suggests that when the brain is faced with too much at once, it actually triggers a limbic response. It perceives the task load as a genuine threat.
A threat, like a physical threat.
In a sense, yes. That perceived threat is the key mechanism. When you experience overwhelm, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning and executive function, it basically gets flooded. Think of it like a computer crashing. Just too many heavy programs running at the same time. The easiest, most energy-efficient solution for the brain in that moment. Shut down all planning and just freeze.
Okay, so that's why overwhelm leads directly to procrastination.
Precisely. The energy cost of starting seems infinitely high in that state. It's a protective shutdown.
That makes perfect sense, actually. It's a defense mechanism, not some lack of effort. Okay, so the second killer identified is the fear of failure. This isn't just about, messing up a task, is it? The sources really emphasize this specific fear is often tied directly to our self-worth.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is that the fear of failure is often really a fear of negative judgment. It's about how others might see us, or how we might see ourselves. If your identity is heavily invested in being competent or smart or successful, then failing at a task, well, it feels like it means potentially failing at your core identity.
Yeah.
And this specific fear is so insidious because it stops us from even starting anything new or challenging. The logic is, if you don't play the game, you can't possibly lose, right? So the cycle of inaction is cemented. It's a guaranteed way to avoid that negative emotional feedback, even if it means sacrificing any chance of progress.
It's like a self-preservation strategy gone wrong. Okay, so if the first 2 are kind of emotional and maybe physical responses, the third one sounds more directional. It's a simple lack of clarity. When your goals are undefined or you don't have a clear roadmap, your motivation naturally just sort of dissipates.
That's exactly it. Without clarity, the brain is expending valuable cognitive energy, constantly questioning things like, what should I actually do next? Or is this even the right path? The sources suggest that the energy required just to process that kind of uncertainty is immense. So if the destination is unknown, the brain defaults to staying put. Why? Because movement feels directionless, and directionless activity feels like a waste of precious resources.
Right, you wouldn't just drive without knowing where you're going.
Exactly, and this is why goals must be specific, measurable, tangible, smart goals essentially, to give the brain a clear target to actually aim for. Clarity reduces that cognitive load.
Okay, moving on to the fourth factor, burnout. This feels critical because it seems like it would require a completely different approach than the others. The research defines burnout not just as a bad week, but as continuous, unrelenting stress without proper recovery. It's deep depletion.
A very deep depletion. The sources state quite clearly that burnout drains energy so completely that the basic biochemical fuel needed for forward movement is just absent. You might actually have the clarity, you might have rediscovered your purpose, but if your nervous system is consistently in overdrive, any forward movement can feel physically and mentally impossible.
So this is where we really have to distinguish.
Absolutely. If you're paralyzed by overwhelm, the solution might be structure, like those microactions we'll talk about. But if you're paralyzed by burnout, the first step has to be rest, because the machine itself is broken, essentially. Trying to push through burnout without recovery just prolongs the stagnation and can make things much worse.
That's a vital distinction. Okay, and finally, the fifth killer, which definitely thrives in our hyperconnected world. Comparison and self-doubt. This is that habit of constantly comparing your achievements or your life stage or whatever it is to others, especially those idealized or, frankly, filtered versions we see online.
Oh, absolutely. This is a classic example of what psychologists call upward social comparison. And the research really emphasizes how this constant internal measurement erodes self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy, meaning your belief in your own ability to succeed.
Exactly. Your belief that you can actually do the thing. Every time you compare yourself and find yourself lacking, you're essentially sending a signal to your brain that your efforts are inadequate, maybe even pointless. It fosters this thought, why should I even bother trying harder if the results will never measure up to that perceived external standard? It's a very quick route to convincing yourself there's just no point in trying.
Wow. So if we try to connect this all together, these 5 factors, they can create a really devastating feedback loop, can't they? Like, lack of clarity could lead pretty quickly to overwhelm,
Right.
which then triggers the fear of failure.
Mhm.
And if it persists, maybe it culminates in burnout, which then fuels even more crippling self-doubt from the comparison.
You've nailed it. That's the core insight here from the sources. Recognizing which of these 5 factors is the primary source of your freeze is absolutely crucial for tailoring the solution. If you're genuinely burned out, no amount of vision boarding is going to fix it until you integrate serious rest and recovery. If you're paralyzed by comparison, the work needs to be focused on internal metrics, self-compassion, maybe curating your inputs, not just setting clearer goals.
So understanding the root cause lets us tailor the fix, rather than just applying some useless general solution that tries to treat overwhelm when the real problem is deep exhaustion, for example.
Precisely. Diagnosis first, then treatment.
Okay, that's a really profound breakdown of the barriers. I think that helps clarify why we get stuck. Now we can start to pivot towards the solutions. And the guide is pretty emphatic that you can't just jump straight into action plans. You have to first achieve some kind of internal alignment. We need to start with the self, setting the stage with 2 foundational steps. This brings us to step 1. Acknowledge your feelings. Now, this isn't about wallowing, is it? The sources seem to insist on the necessity of self-compassion here. They argue that pretending everything is fine or trying to just brutally force yourself to snap out of it is actually counterproductive.
It really is. Self-compassion in this context is about establishing a factual, honest starting point. It's not about resignation, it's about recognition. When you try to push down those feelings, the anxiety, the frustration, the sadness, the overwhelming, those emotions don't just vanish. They tend to go underground and become subconscious drivers of your inaction. The source material argues that forceful self-criticism often generates internal resistance. It's like arguing with yourself. Whereas acknowledgement, simply saying, okay, I feel stuck right now, I feel overwhelmed, and that's okay for this moment, that actually releases the pressure. It allows the prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, to kind of come back online and re-engage rather than being hijacked by the emotion.
So how do we turn that acknowledgement into something practical, like a tool we can actually use? The sources mention things like structured journaling.
Yes, journaling is highly recommended, but it's more than just, venting onto a page. The research suggests maybe a 2-part approach for this specific purpose. First, maybe a stream of consciousness dump, just to get the emotional chaos out, let it flow. But then second, a more structured analysis, asking yourself things like, what were the specific triggers today? Which of those 5 motivation killers did I actually experience? When did I feel most stuck?
Okay, so it's about pattern recognition.
Exactly. This process helps organize those chaotic thoughts and helps you identify repeating patterns. It moves the problem from being this vague, heavy feeling to becoming a more solvable puzzle. And the sources also strongly recommend talking about it, sharing these feelings with a trusted friend, a mentor, maybe a therapist. Just externalizing the problem can instantly reduce its emotional weight and make the scale seem less daunting.
That really reframes step one. It's not about giving in, it's about choosing an informed starting point. Okay, so now the guide does something interesting. It's just skipping ahead slightly for a moment. We'll come back to the practical action steps like step two later, but the authors insist we immediately reconnect with our deepest internal driver after acknowledging our feelings. This is step three. Revisit your why, connecting purpose to action. Why is the why so critical right now, even before we start breaking down the tasks themselves?
Well, think of it this way. Without a compelling why, you're essentially running on borrowed energy or sheer willpower, which is notoriously finite. Motivation is always strongest and most sustainable when it's linked to an enduring purpose, something that transcends the immediate reward or the immediate difficulty. The guide highlights the really important difference between extrinsic motivation, things like getting a bonus or hitting a certain number on the scale, and intrinsic motivation.
Right, intrinsic being more about fulfilling a core value or contributing to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. Extrinsic motivation is great for a short sprint, maybe gets you started. But intrinsic motivation is the powerful engine you need for the marathon, for navigating the inevitable dips and challenges. The essential questions the sources suggest you ask yourself are things like, why do I really want this outcome? What larger impact will achieving this have on my life, or maybe on the lives of people I care about? How does this align with my core values?
And the idea is that when actions are tied to that meaningful why, they stop feeling like draining discipline or just another obligation on the list.
And they transform into purposeful steps toward a future you genuinely desire. That fundamental shift in the cognitive framework, that reframing, provides incredible resilience against the inevitable setbacks and frustrations.
The sources even provide a practical visualization exercise here, like the classic vision board, or perhaps even more powerfully, they suggest writing a detailed narrative, like a short paragraph or page, about your ideal future state, and then placing it somewhere you'll see it daily. How does a static image or a paragraph actually maintain focus against the daily grind and overwhelm?
It serves as a constant point of alignment. Think of it like a compass for your decisions. When you feel adrift during the day or maybe unsure about which micro action to take next, you look at your why, your vision. And ideally, it instantly helps filter out those distracting tasks or temptations that don't actually serve that deeper purpose. It's a daily reminder that the temporary discomfort or pain of the effort leads directly to the long-term gain of fulfillment you're seeking.
So it anchors you back.
It anchors you back. Without that robust purpose, the fear and overwhelm we discussed back in section 1 will easily overtake any temporary burst of willpower you manage to muster. That why ensures the effort you put in is sustained because it means something.
Okay, so the internal foundation feels solid now. We've acknowledged the emotional barriers, the reality of where we are, and we've reconnected with that core purpose, that why. Now we can move into the mechanics of creating genuine momentum. And this starts with the very first practical action step, which the guide placed as step 2. This brings us back to step 2. Break down your goals, the micro-action strategy. The problem, as we established earlier, is often looking at the entire mountain you have to climb. It's paralyzing. The solution offered is this micro-action strategy, breaking those daunting goals into incredibly small, almost comically simple, actionable steps.
Yes, this step is a direct assault on both overwhelm and the fear of failure. What we need to do, according to the research, is radically lower what's called the activation energy.
Activation energy.
Yeah, it's basically the mental toll, the psychic effort required just to start a task. If that first step feels too large or too demanding, you'll stall. Your brain resists. But if the first step is ridiculously small, maybe takes 2 minutes or less, the cognitive energy required to begin is almost negligible. There's very little resistance.
Can you give some examples? The sources had a few good ones.
They're filled with them. So instead of the goal being I need to clean the entire house, which feels huge, the micro action might be pick up one piece of trash and put it in the bin. That's it. Or instead of I need to write that massive complex report, the first micro action is just open a blank document and type the title. Maybe write the first sentence.
Just getting it open.
Just opening it. And the key insight here, which is so counterintuitive for many people, is that motivation often follows action, not the other way around. You don't need motivation to take the tiny action. The tiny action itself creates the motivation. Completing that small task provides a small, immediate dopamine hit. It's a little reward signal.
The brain likes that.
The brain loves it. It signals that the task is safe, It's rewarding, and therefore it's worth repeating or continuing. That's how you build the true momentum loop, starting incredibly small.
That's where it gets really interesting, isn't it? It's leveraging the neurochemistry of the small win. The sources give a great specific example for anyone listening who might feel stuck on something like learning a new skill. Say your overall goal is learn to code. That feels massive. The microactions are not write a complex program.
Definitely not.
They are things like day 1, just find and open the tutorial link you bookmarked. Day 2, install the necessary software. Don't even use it yet, just install it. Day 3, type out the very first line of example code provided in the tutorial. That's it.
Exactly. This structure practically guarantees success right out of the gate. You can open a link, you can install software, you can copy one line of code, and each tiny success reinforces your sense of ability and starts to build confidence, countering that self-doubt.
And the guide stresses celebrating that win, right? Even if it feels silly.
Absolutely. You must acknowledge and celebrate that small win, even if it's just a quiet, internal, yes, I did it. That internal praise helps build self-efficacy, actively countering the negative self-talk we identified earlier as a killer.
Okay, so we've broken down the task internally. Now, moving beyond that internal structure, we need to tackle the external world with step 4. Change your environment, reducing friction. The idea here seems to be that if microactions lower the cognitive barrier to starting, changing your environment lowers the physical and emotional friction that can stop you.
Precisely. Our surroundings have a profound, often underestimated, measurable impact on our focus, our mood, and our state of mind. There was one fascinating data point we found in the research suggesting that simple visual clutter in your immediate workspace actually competes for your attention and significantly reduces your working memory capacity.
Really? Just clutter.
Just visible clutter. It effectively slows down your cognitive processing because your brain is subconsciously tracking all those objects. So, decluttering your workspace isn't just about tidiness. It's an instant strategy for stress reduction and focus enhancement. It literally frees up brain power.
It's almost like you're trying to default your life towards the positive choices by engineering the environment.
That's a perfect way to put it. Environmental design for behavior change. If you want to read more, don't hide the book on a shelf. Put it right on your pillow or your nightstand.
Makes it easy to grab.
Makes it the easiest option. If you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before. Reduces that morning decision fatigue. If you want to eat healthier, put the fruit bowl right where you can see it, front and center, and maybe hide the junk food in a less accessible place.
Remove the friction for the good habits, add friction for the bad ones.
Exactly. And this extends beyond just physical objects. Surround yourself with inspiration that actively reminds you of your why, maybe quotes, images, whatever works for you. And critically, limit the negative influences. That means actively pruning your social media feeds to remove accounts that trigger comparison or negativity. It might mean reducing contact with people who consistently drain your energy or fuel self-doubt. These are pure friction points that will absolutely sabotage your hard-won momentum.
Even small physical adjustments can help.
Definitely. Small things like moving your desk to face a window for more natural light or adding a couple of plants to your space studies show these can significantly improve mood and perceived energy levels. It's about making your environment work for you, not against you. And what's really fascinating, as the sources point out, is how step 2, microactions, and step 4, environment, work in perfect synchronization.
How so?
Well, step 2 reduces the size of the cognitive hurdle, making the goal feel achievable. Step 4 reduces the resistance you encounter on the path toward that goal, making your environment supportive rather than obstructive.
Ah, I see. So you're tackling both the internal perception of the task and the external friction around it.
Precisely. By addressing both the goal structure itself and the external friction in your environment, you effectively clear the path for action and make initiating that first step feel much, much easier, almost effortless, ideally.
Okay, so we've engineered the launch, we've broken down the goal, connected to our why, cleared the environment. We've hopefully generated some initial momentum with those first microactions. Now comes the critical stage. How do we sustain that velocity, especially when that initial surge of inspiration inevitably fades? Because it will fade.
It absolutely will. Inspiration is fleeting.
So this requires building structural resilience. The sources suggest this comes through routine and also through a fundamental shift in how we view mistakes or imperfection. Let's talk about step 5. Use the power of routine. Habits over inspiration. The core principle here seems to be that we need to train our brains to rely less on that unreliable feeling of motivation and more on consistent action embedded in predictable routines.
That's the heart of it. When an action becomes a habit, it requires minimal conscious thought or executive function to initiate. It runs on autopilot. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't generally stand there debating whether you feel motivated enough to do it. You just do it. It's ingrained.
Right, it's automatic.
Exactly. The sources explain that by automating positive behaviors through routine, you effectively save your limited willpower reserves. You conserve that mental energy for higher-level decision-making, creative problem-solving, or handling unexpected challenges, rather than draining it on basic recurring tasks. Routine is like building a mental savings account for your energy.
So how do we actually build these robust routines, especially when we're starting from a place of feeling stuck? The guide advises starting really small, maybe just one or two new habits at first, and using a technique called anchoring. Can you elaborate on that anchoring strategy?
Yes, anchoring, sometimes called habit stacking, is a very effective technique. It means tying a new desired habit directly to an existing, already established routine. That existing routine acts as the trigger, the reminder cue. For example, let's say you have an established routine of making coffee every morning. You anchor your new habit to that. The rule becomes, after I start the kettle, that's the existing habit, the anchor, I will immediately spend 5 minutes planning my top 3 priorities for the day. That's the new habit.
Ah, so the coffee ritual triggers the planning ritual.
Precisely. It reduces the likelihood of forgetting the new behavior because it's linked to something you already do automatically, smooths the transition. And tracking the habit, as the sources also emphasize, is vital, especially early on. Whether you use a simple journal, a check mark on a calendar, or an app, seeing that visual chain of consistency buildup becomes a powerful motivator in itself. You develop a desire not to break the chain.
That visibility definitely turns invisible progress into something tangible, a measurable win you can see. However, consistency often runs headlong into a major psychological barrier for many people, which brings us directly to step 6. Focus on action, not perfection, breaking the killer cycle. The sources are really explicit in identifying perfectionism as a primary motivation killer, right alongside the others we discussed.
Oh, absolutely. And this can often be the hardest mental shift, especially for people who are generally high achievers or have high standards. Perfectionism in this context often functions as a form of chronic procrastination that's fueled by that deep fear of judgment or failure we talked about.
So it masquerades as high standards, but it's really fear.
Often, yes. Waiting for the conditions to be absolutely perfect, waiting until you feel completely ready, which might be never. Waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect insight. It inevitably leads to inaction. You get stuck in analysis paralysis. The sources are very clear here. The mantra has to become something like, imperfect action is always better than perfect inaction. The primary goal needs to shift from achieving mastery on day one to simply achieving movement.
But for someone really stuck in that perfection loop, how do you actually force that shift? It can feel like a really deep-seated fear, almost part of your identity.
It's tough. You often need structural constraints, external rules that limit the opportunity for perfectionism to take hold and paralyze you. Techniques like using a timer, the classic Pomodoro method is a great example, are really useful here. You commit to a short, focused block of time working on the task, say 25 minutes, not to producing a specific, flawless output within that time.
So you focus on the clock, not the quality initially.
Exactly. It significantly reduces the stakes for that work session. The crucial mindset shift, which takes practice, is focusing on the effort and the process. Log the time you spent working, acknowledge the effort, rather than obsessing over the immediate outcome or the quality of the results in that first messy attempt. Taking that messy, imperfect action is what breaks the cycle. You gain far more valuable learning and momentum from producing a sloppy first draft than you do from staring at a blank page for hours, waiting for genius to strike.
That provides the internal resilience to keep going, even when things aren't perfect. But what about those days when the internal engine is just sputtering? When the routine feels impossible and the self-talk is winning? That leads us neatly into step 7. Seek external motivation strategically. It's okay to need a boost sometimes.
It's more than okay. It's pragmatic and realistic. Acknowledging that sometimes your internal drive will be low is just being human. External sources can provide a necessary kickstart or a bridge over a rough patch. The sources list several tangible resources. Things like accountability partners, finding a friend, a colleague, maybe a mentor who checks in on your progress. Even a small layer of positive social obligation can make a difference.
Like you don't want to let them down.
Exactly. Then there's inspirational content books, talks, articles. Even listening to a deep dive like this one can provide a temporary jolt of energy, new perspectives, or just a reminder of your why. And finally, joining communities, whether online forums or offline groups focused on your goal, can provide shared energy, encouragement, and practical tips from others on the same path.
The operative word in the step title, though, is strategically. How do we ensure we're not just outsourcing our fundamental drive and becoming dependent on these external things?
That's the absolutely critical caveat, and the sources are quite firm on this. External motivation should be viewed like high-octane racing fuel. It's great for a quick start, gives you a powerful boost to break through inertia, but it's unsustainable and ultimately very expensive, in terms of reliance, to run on long term. You must use it strategically to kickstart your momentum, to get the engine turning over again. But then you immediately need to shift back to relying on the internal consistency of your routine, step 5, and your connection to your why, step 3, to maintain that forward movement.
So it's a jump start, not the main engine.
Precisely. If you become solely reliant on external validation, praise, or inspiration, your drive will inevitably crash every single time that external source is absent or unavailable. You need your own power source. And if we connect this section back to the bigger picture, steps 5, routine, and 6, action over perfection, are really teaching us essential resilience for the long haul. Routine provides the bedrock of consistency needed for long-term progress. And actively fighting perfectionism provides the necessary flexibility and self-compassion needed when things inevitably go wrong or don't meet our initial expectations.
Right, because things will go wrong sometimes.
They always do. This structural approach, combining routine with anti-perfectionism, helps ensure that a small setback, like a missed workout, a messy first draft, a day where you just couldn't stick to the plan, doesn't trigger that full psychological paralysis and send you spiraling right back into stagnation. It contains the damage.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. We have the plan, the microactions, the environmental setup, the routines, the mindset shifts around perfection, and the strategic use of external boosts. We have the structure. The final steps in this 10-step framework remind us that motivation isn't just psychological or structural. It's deeply intertwined with our physical state and also our mental agility and willingness to adapt. If the machine isn't running optimally, the best plan in the world is likely to fail. So, we arrive at step 8. Take care of your mental and physical health. This feels almost foundational, maybe should have been step 0. The sources make a direct, really undeniable connection. When your physical energy is low, sustained action feels and often is simply impossible.
It truly is foundational. We often try to talk about complex goal achievement, mindset hacks and productivity systems without addressing the absolute basics. And the research is clear. It doesn't work well that way. For instance, if you are consistently operating under a sleep deficit, your prefrontal cortex, that's your decision-making, planning, and impulse control center, is effectively impaired, measurably impaired.
Like being drunk almost.
Some studies suggest the cognitive impairment can be similar to alcohol intoxication after significant sleep deprivation. It makes complex tasks much harder, and resisting temptations or distractions becomes significantly more difficult. Consistent quality sleep is just non-negotiable. It's when your brain literally performs cognitive repair and consolidation.
Okay, sleep is critical. What about activity? We just talked about burnout, and the idea of pushing for action when you feel utterly depleted can seem counterintuitive or even harmful.
That's a fair point, and it loops back to diagnosing the type of stuckness. If you're truly burned out, deep rest is primary. However, for general stagnation or low energy, not related to clinical burnout, the sources suggest that even light physical movement can be incredibly beneficial. It releases endorphins, improves blood flow to the brain, enhances focus, and can directly counter the mental fog that often accompanies stagnation. We're not necessarily talking about a punishing marathon here. A simple 15-minute walk outside can provide a fundamental chemical shift in your mood and perceived energy levels.
So movement can actually create energy in that context.
It often can, yes. And of course, proper nutrition plays a huge role in maintaining steady energy levels and avoiding those blood sugar crashes that kill focus and drive. Balanced meals support cognitive function. Furthermore, the sources strongly emphasize mindfulness practices, not necessarily hour-long meditations, but simple techniques like structured breathing exercises for a few minutes or taking short, intentional breaks during the day, specifically to reset the nervous system and manage accumulating stress.
Little resets.
Little resets. When the body and mind are adequately nourished, rested, and relatively calm, motivation tends to flow much more naturally. You're working with your biology, not against it.
Okay, that covers the physical machine. Next, the framework addresses the mental rigidity that often accompanies feeling stuck. This is step 9. Embrace curiosity and experimentation.
This is such an interesting one. Feeling stuck often stems from, or leads to, a very fixed mindset. A belief that there's only one narrow, rigid path forward, or that you already know how things will turn out, usually negatively.
Yeah.
Curiosity completely breaks that pattern. It inherently introduces novelty, exploration, and discovery, which are powerful, intrinsic human motivators. We're naturally wired to be curious. When you approach a task or a problem with genuine curiosity, asking, what happens if I try it this way? Or what could I learn from this even if it doesn't work out perfectly? You fundamentally transform the nature of failure.
How so?
An attempt that doesn't yield the desired result stops being a failure, that confirms your inadequacy, and instead becomes simply a piece of useful data. It's information gathering. Okay, that approach didn't work. What did I learn? What could I try differently next time?
So it shifts from judgment to learning. What are some practical ways to embrace this curiosity if you're feeling stuck?
The sources suggest things like intentionally trying a new hobby, completely unrelated to your main goal, just to stimulate different parts of your brain. Exploring a new subject, reading something outside your usual field, or even something as simple as altering your daily commute or walking route, just to expose yourself to new stimuli.
What's the core takeaway here for someone listening who feels trapped in a rut?
The core takeaway is the power of continuous learning and the resilience it builds. Every experience, whether you label it a success or a failure, adds to your knowledge base and reinforces the idea that you are adaptive, that you can learn and adjust. Curiosity reignites a sense of excitement and possibility, and that excitement is a form of pure, positive fuel for motivation that doesn't rely on discipline or brute willpower. It naturally pulls you forward instead of you having to constantly push yourself.
I like that idea of being pulled instead of pushing. Okay, finally, we reach the capstone of the entire 10-step framework. Step 10, reflect and adjust regularly, the continuous process. Motivation isn't a destination you arrive at, it's an ongoing practice.
Exactly. This isn't a set it and forget it system. The sources strongly advise building in time for regular reflection, suggesting maybe a weekly check-in as a good starting point.
A weekly review, what does that look like?
It's a crucial maintenance check. It means consciously taking a few minutes to review your week. What went well? What actions moved you forward? Celebrate those successes, acknowledge the effort, and, just as importantly, analyze what didn't work or where you got stuck, but crucially, doing so without judgment. You're not there to beat yourself up. You're there to collect data. Why did I miss that workout? What obstacle prevented me from starting that task? Was my microaction small enough?
So it's data collection for course correction, not self-flagellation.
Precisely. This step provides the vital quality of flexibility. We absolutely must avoid replacing the rigidity of being stuck with a new rigidity of clinging to an unworkable plan just because we wrote it down. Regular reflection allows you to adjust your approach based on reality, your current energy levels, your changing circumstances, the feedback you're getting from your actions. This proactive adjustment helps prevent future stagnation before it even starts.
And the source even encourages the ultimate flexibility, right? Like being willing to pivot or even abandon a goal.
Yes, and that's really important. Don't be afraid to significantly pivot your approach or even consciously decide to abandon or postpone a goal if your core values have shifted or your circumstances have fundamentally changed. Goals should serve you and your current why. You shouldn't become a slave at outdated goals that no longer resonate. It's just another form of being stuck.
That makes sense.
So this final section, bringing together the physical necessity of health, step 8, with the adaptive power of curiosity, step 9, and reflection, creates the ultimate sustainable closed-loop system. By continually checking the health of your body and mind, embracing learning, and evaluating the efficacy of your plan, you ensure that you stay aligned with your current purpose and maintain that forward progress, potentially indefinitely. #outro.
Wow. We've really covered the full journey in this deep dive, haven't we? Moving all the way from understanding that paralyzing fear and frustration of inaction right through to a robust, practical 10-step framework designed for continuous progress and building resilience. Let's just quickly recap this vital framework for everyone listening. It starts with diagnosis, understanding your psychological root causes. Is it primarily fear, overwhelm, lack of clarity, burnout, or comparison? That's section 1. Then you establish that crucial internal foundation by acknowledging your current state with self-compassion, step 1, and reconnecting deeply with your sustainable why, your purpose, step 3.
That's the base.
Once that internal drive is solidified, you engineer external momentum. First, by breaking down those overwhelming goals into tiny, almost foolproof microactions, step 2. And second, by intentionally designing your environment to reduce friction and support your goals, step 4.
Lowering the barriers, internally and externally.
Exactly. Then, to sustain that drive over the long haul, you commit to building routine, relying on habits over fleeting inspiration. Step 5. You consciously choose action and effort over debilitating perfectionism. Step 6. And you learn to strategically use external sources of motivation for those necessary kickstarts without becoming dependent. Step 7.
Building that resilience.
And finally, you maintain that entire structure holistically by taking consistent care of your fundamental mental and physical health. Step 8. By actively embracing curiosity and experimentation to keep learning and adapting. Step 9. And crucially, by building in regular reflection to celebrate progress and adjust your approach as needed. Step 10. The core message from all the source material we reviewed feels incredibly empowering. You don't have to sit around and wait for some magic moment of motivation to strike you. Motivation is something you actively create through conscious, structural effort.
That's beautifully summarized. My final insight, building on that, is this. The sources are very clear that motivation is not meant to be some constant, roaring fire. It naturally ebbs and flows for everyone. That's normal. What truly matters, what makes the difference between staying stuck and moving forward, is creating a framework like this 10-step process we've discussed that allows you to keep taking small actions, generating that low-level momentum, even on the days when the feeling of drive is at its absolute lowest point.
So the system carries you when the feeling isn't there.
Exactly. The framework itself guarantees that small setbacks, bad days, or dips in inspiration don't trigger that full system psychological freeze that sends you back to square one. So your mission, if you choose to accept it, is simple but genuinely powerful. We challenge you right now to identify the very first tiny step, that single micro action related to whatever goal you feel stuck on, that you can realistically take today, not tomorrow morning, not next week, today, maybe even the next hour. Take that one small step, generate that tiny win, and just watch how that single act of conscious effort can set the stage for lasting, transformative change.